Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's always a treat for me to use this podcast as a way to connect with someone that I've been wanting to meet. And now you get a chance to listen in our first conversation, learning from today's guest. Without any further delay, let me do the formal introduction. What does it take to write a book that truly changes lives, yours included? Today's guest has made it her life's work to help authors do exactly that. As a publishing strategist and developmental editor, she's guided everyone from first-time writers to New York Times bestselling authors with millions of copies sold. Her approach goes far beyond the mechanics of writing. It's about crafting a must-read that builds connection, credibility, and community. She's been the writing partner behind 10 books with author Mike Michalowicz, including one of my favorites, Profit First and Clockwork. As the head writing coach for Heroic Public Speaking, she's helped thought leaders, scientists, and speakers from Harvard, Yale, and TEDx Cambridge bring their big ideas to the stage with clarity and heart. The authors she coaches learn how to develop transformational manuscripts that make an impact and leave a legacy. Please join me in welcoming AJ Harper. Welcome, AJ.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here.
So I'm always curious about the origin story to this amazing journey you've had as an author and as a publishing strategist. How far back does this writing bug go for you?
Pretty far back, but it wasn't books, it was plays. Yeah. So I think I wrote my first play. I was 11 and it was an adaptation of a children's book called The Donkey Prince. And that gave me the bug. And I stayed with that for a really long time until I had a child. And I was 31 and living in Brooklyn and realized that I wanted to write full time. You know, when you're a playwright, you also have a straight job. Nobody's making any money. And I wanted to keep writing, but I didn't want to have, the kind of straight jobs I would get. I would be away from my child a lot. So, and then also writing plays, you have to go workshops and residencies all over. So I thought, all right, well, let me figure out how to make a living as a writer with doing something else so I can be with my kid. That was really the whole thing. And that's how books happened.
I have to say, though, assuming that going into this thinking, okay, but I can make a livelihood off of writing, like, did you know anyone who had done that? Like, was that a known outcome?
I definitely had playwriting mentors who were very successful.
Mm.
And so I knew that, but not in terms of just freelancing,
Yeah,
and I didn't set out to write books. I set out, I will write anything
got it.
as long as it's not something that's going to hurt someone, like bomb instructions or something like that. I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
So I had no portfolio. I had nothing except plays. I mean, what are you supposed to send when someone wants you to write an article? Here's my last play.
How do
That's
you get started then? Like, how did you overcome that? I mean, that's a sticky
It's pretty
point.
easy when you have to pay, buy groceries.
Mm.
I mean, I was just trying to figure it out. How can I do this? And I just busted my butt whenever my son was sleeping. Literally, whenever he was taking a nap, then I would work. And I started out on Elance, which became Upwork, 21 years ago, almost 21 years ago, with an infant.
Who
Uh,
were some of those earlier clients? Like, like the types of people that were seeking you out?
I wrote everything. Travel books for places I'd never been. Um, Tons of articles. Everything was articles, articles, articles. And then the first book I was hired to write was just a 20,000 word book about Google AdWords, which I knew nothing about. So I had to figure it out. And then because I had that book, another person, just a couple of months later, hired me to write my first personal development book. And so I was like, all right. And I figured, okay, I can do this. And what I learned was the playwriting background was a huge help to me. I didn't think they were connected at all, but the thing I became known for privately as a ghost was being able to do the voice. And so I think all my years of developing my ear for character development paid off because I could do that.
Did you know at the very beginning that you were a ghostwriter, or were you a person being hired to write blog posts and articles? Like, when did the identity piece become ghostwriter?
Good question. No one ever asked me that. I think with this personal development book, then I understood, oh, this isn't just freelance writing. This is its own thing. And then, like so many ghosts, I just threw myself in the deep end and figured it out. Yeah.
And were there other people that you were now networking with who were in the publishing world? Did you know the ghostwriters, like once you realized that that was what you were doing, or were you still kind of figuring it out by yourself?
That was a different time. I mean, this was 2005. I came up in, I was a ghostwriter full time from 2005 until 2016. And I'm telling you, when I was stealth, I was stealth. So I hardly knew any other ghostwriters. I think I maybe knew two in that whole time. I was like, people, and I joke about it being like some sort of like Martin Scorsese film or something, but it really was like, if somebody knew me, they would pass my number to someone. And honestly, it was just by phone. Hey, so and so gave me your number.
What a hard way to build a book of business.
It wasn't though, because here's what happened. That person who hired me for the personal development book,
Yeah.
she was connected.
Oh, that's good. Okay. So really the tipping point for that early success is that the first person who gave you a chance, you did great work and they spread the word.
Luck. And so that person was like, you need AJ, you need AJ, you need AJ. And then I met enough of the people in the thought leadership industry, which has changed so much in 20 years. But back in the day, if you were, once you were in that inner circle, it was good. But the thing that was different about me is I was so stealth. So if you really didn't want anyone to know, you would pretty much call me.
Right. Because they wanted the credit for having created this thought leadership book. And there was what was the concern? I mean, today there are people who are maybe a little more open about the fact they work with a ghostwriter, but like, what was it like
Yeah.
back then?
No one wanted anyone to know. If I was in the room, nobody would say what my job was. So I knew my role, For a person who used to be a back of the room wallflower girl, I was fine, I know I'm supposed to listen. We're gonna probably have a private meeting later. Most people aren't gonna know why I'm here.
Why were you there? Like, I can just imagine you sitting in a small room with a few people. You're like just taking notes. Like, what are you, the intern, assistant? Like,
well, I wasn't in that many rooms live, but sometimes clients would fly me out to a conference or a thing.
oh,
You know what I mean? So I want you to hear this. I want you to meet this person. I want you to talk to this person. Or I'm going to be here. Can I fly you out for this? And then we'll also talk about the book kind of thing. But honestly, most of it was over phone.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of it was phone. Not even, I had to record. I had 1-800-conferencecall.com account because it was free. And
Right.
so I would record all my phone calls with people and then transcribe them because you had to transcribe your own stuff then. It was pre-AI, so old school.
I mean, that's a lot of the time was just spent probably doing that, which is so funny how that's no longer like
Yeah,
like that step is almost entirely gone. Like editing, obviously that step, but like I remember transcribing things in college in the late 90s, just how long it took to
it's so
transcribe
I miss it.
interviews.
You know why I miss it? Because I used to leave myself Easter eggs and clues when I was talking. And so I
Mm,
actually liked the act of transcribing because then I would pull stuff immediately while I was doing it and grab my little clues. And I got really good at kind of setting future self up, you know? And then when I got so much ghostwriting work that
yeah.
sometimes I would, with the client's permission, hire other ghosts and train them. But it wasn't an official business or anything like that. It was just if I can't deal kind of
You couldn't do it.
situations. I would also leave them clues in the transcript because I would always be doing these interviews and I would leave them the clues. Here's the
Yeah.
message. Here's the story.
Right.
Yeah. So I kind of miss it.
Yeah. I think in today's world, when I'm on a call with someone and the Fathom is running in the background, when I'm on with a client, I'll say transcript 3 times and tell them afterwards, go look for that in the notes.
Oh, yeah, smart. This
Um,
is the spot. This is
just so you can like, or I'll be like, I'll say transcript 3 times and then I'll say scroll back up.
yes.
We just said something really good a moment ago.
Yeah.
And then now they have bookmarks and all these other things. But yeah, I could see how like you were constructing a story as you were in the interview that your future self could then hook onto. So you weren't starting from a blank page.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the scaffolding of a story, particularly one that isn't yours, is such a different experience. Like I've written 4 books, and I will admit, I've said this before, I don't identify as a writer, yet I published 4 books.
Okay.
It's just not my first medium for communication. I'm no longer as angsty about it as I was for book 1,
What's your first
and I've
medium?
gotten better.
What's your
But
first medium?
sorry?
What's your first medium?
Speaking,
Okay.
communicating.
All right.
So video has been great too, Zoom, in person. I don't mind all of that, but just like podcasts. Talking, I'm an extrovert who wants to think as I talk. So
Okay.
writing is a little more of a focused, solitary. But when I know the content, like I can get really deep into it because it's mine. I'm curious how you hook onto a topic for a book, like you said earlier, for a destination that you'd never been to. Like, how do you create some enthusiasm as a writer, because that's going to come across as well. Like if it's not your story.
I mean, I'll be frank, the early days, there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm. I was just trying to figure out how to pay the rent, So it wasn't that deep. But over time when I realized, oh, this is a thing, this is a real job, and I have a unique opportunity because of this person who was initially introducing me to people. So I decided to just ride that and figure it out. And what became fascinating to me was how can I extract the real message, the best stuff out of these people. That became my favorite part.
Mm,
Yes, I can do the voice. I can become the person. That to me was actually very simple,
mhm.
just because of all my years of training my ear.
Right.
The part that became fun was how can I really get the juice out of them? And so that was more like investigating. Um,
I mean, your
pulling
interview skills must be off the charts, because that you just to get ideas out of our heads, the thought leaders' heads. Like I honestly, in 2017, when I was working on my first book, I couldn't imagine how someone could do that. Like I just didn't have enough. I just didn't know anybody who had done that. I don't think I even really understood the role of a ghostwriter. So to trust somebody, to meet someone who's like, yeah, I can do that.
Mhm.
And of course, you've now developed, well, your name's being passed along. That helps, right? So you're being referred by someone in a network that's pretty
Yes.
tight knit.
Mhm.
But still, like building that rapport early on and kind of getting someone, and then like continuing forward. I mean, it's a very different thing. At some point, though, your name popped up in the scene for me through Mike Michalowicz, and
Mhm.
I mentioned in the intro you've done 10 books with him. He's been on my older show. He's going to be on this version of the show. I really admire his work. His book Profit First is the one of the 3 books I give to all new entrepreneurs when I find out they're building a business. Changed my business trajectory, gave me something to grasp onto that made sense as opposed to what other people had told me about my money. Um, those books are all transformational, and I'm so glad that you're now being associated with them. I mean, how hard is it to see books be successful that you labored on? You were sometimes, flown around the world to get the scoop to write the book. Is that different than you now also have your own book? Like, is there a difference, or and did he help bridge that because he did kind of, you know, say yes, we work together, as opposed to the earlier folks 20 years ago who eschewed the idea of mentioning that there was a ghostwriter?
These are good. You're a very good interviewer, by the way. So it never bothered me when people to see books. I tell this story often. I remember being on the Book Expo exhibition floor. I don't know if you ever went to Book Expo before. It died during COVID. Still miss that show at the Javits. And I remember walking through the floor and just doing my thing, wandering around and seeing a big sign for a book I wrote that had just won a major award. And I think I just kept walking, because the author was going to be there to accept it, but I can't really be there. So I just like go a different direction. The only thing that bothered me was the author didn't tell me. That was the only thing. I don't feel any sense of ownership. I think to be a good ghost, you have to let go. You have to let go of your ego. It can't be the way you want it. It can't be your voice. And you have to let go of all the good things that are going to come to that author because you killed it when you wrote that book. And I was proud and happy to do it. So it never really bothered me. Not at all.
But it fed you knowing it had done well in the world. Like you felt good. Not that it didn't bother you, but other than you being caught off guard, it felt good to know that it had won an award and had been perceived and received so well.
Yes, but I do have this weird trait where when I hear praise or good news or something happens, I'm like, fantastic. Next, is kind of and I need to learn to quit that because I think it's good to allow yourself a moment to say, good on you, but I'm keep in mind when I walked that floor, I had already written a bunch more books. By the time that happens, we're on to the next.
And the next and the next.
Yeah.
What was the journey for you when you started thinking about being public, or maybe Mike, or I don't know if someone before him sort of was open to the idea of sharing about your partnership? Like, what was that? Did you hesitate?
No, well, yes. I mean, I think that if you've always been behind the scenes, whether I was a playwright, that's behind the scenes. I was a ghost behind the scenes, and I didn't even have a website. Like that's so behind the scenes. But the thing with Mike, I don't think I've ever really told this story in its entirety, but it's not like Mike said, I'm going to promote you and I want the world to know about AJ. It's not like that. The first book I did with him was I've done all his books. I'm his writer on all his books except the children's book. And the first book was more like a book doctoring kind of situation, and total stealth, no one knew. Second book was picked up by Penguin before it was Penguin Random House. And that was also totally stealth to the point where I had to change the way I addressed the editorial comments, when the substantive edit was going on, which I was used to doing at that point. So, but then I think something changed in him, and he just felt like I think he came to understand that he's the author and I was the ghost at the time. We're co-writers now, which is a different kind of relationship. It's evolved into more of a collaboration. But at the time, I think he had to come into his own as an author and realize, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur who wrote a couple books. This is my new identity. And it's something that I was trying to get him to do, because I knew if he would do it, he would be all in a different way. And once he made that turn, he didn't mind telling anyone. I remember being at a dinner in New York, and he asked me to join, and there was an editor there, and he introduced me. I stay back, He introduced me, but he said exactly who I was. And the editor said, I knew it. I was like, okay, and so since then, I think he's just wanted to be in integrity himself, but it's not like he goes around promoting me all over the place, unless you listen to our podcast, in which case he promotes me all the time. But before that, we were just a collaboration and he was being honest.
Yeah. And I think that piece where you were encouraging him to step into his own identity as an author and really embrace that probably shifted that for him, because then he felt strongly about the work. Like it was his work. You were facilitating.
Yeah, it is his work.
That work. You were facilitating it becoming something we all could access, but it helped him embrace that identity, embrace the idea of like continuing to create that kind of work. And I love the idea of this becoming a partnership as the evolution. Were there any authors that you had previously worked with who were a little nervous about you suddenly being out about being like, or that editors knew, or like, is there a kerfuffle happening in the publishing world, when that was starting to happen? Like,
I'm
Oh
not
my
that
God, it was AJ. Just like I knew it. She
I'm not that
shows up
big a deal.
everywhere.
I promise you, I'm not. Most people don't know who I am. I did no, there's nothing was happening. Nobody cared. No,
Nothing that you knew about, at least.
I don't think so. I mean, honestly, I had to turn down working with an agent one time because she wanted to sign me, but wanted my entire client list. And I said, well, I can't give that to you. I have NDAs.
Yeah.
And she said, that's ridiculous. Everyone knows you are allowed to say that to agents. I was like, I don't think that's what it says in my contract.
Yeah.
So I had to say, I'm actually getting work just fine. People call me. It's okay, you know? Um,
Yeah. I
so
mean,
I don't think many people knew me, Robbie, you know?
and then you in 2022 came out with your own book, which is not quite, but almost 20 years, right? Like later.
Don't say it like that. Oh my gosh.
Write a must read, craft a book that changes lives, including your own. You hooked us right from the title. So, I mean, this is your magic, your like everything you've lived and learned, you've been translating for all of us, and you were stepping out to be public, like clearly related to this. There's a website, you're doing the podcast with Mike, you're having a personal expression that's more visible. What's that like for you after being, like you said, the kind of person in the corner of the room that no one's really paying close attention to? Suddenly, I mean, in my circles, you are well known. I know you're like, no one knows me. I'm like, you're every time something comes up in the thought leader circle about a book, your name's going to be listed. I'm hoping sometimes my name is listed. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's always going to be AJ. Like sometimes people are like, oh, and Robbie too. It's like, and we do very different things, but
Me too.
you are clearly now really established, and this is only a handful of years later from that book. What was happening in the few years before the book came to be? Were you already doing programs and courses? Were you already working with clients, and this was just sort of the public version of this that we all could access? Like, how did that evolution go from partner to an author, or ghostwriter, partner to an author, and then now working with authors?
That's a good question. I'm sorry, you stunned me when you said it was almost 20 years before you wrote your own book. I never thought about it in the math of that, and that just took me out for a minute, and I listened to half of what you said because like, oh my God, what was wrong with me? I quit ghostwriting uh, out of necessity. Burned out a lot of people and not in integrity. You've seen behind the curtain, you can't unsee it. Not everybody is who they say they are, you know? And so I had to get out. And I also probably burned out 2 years before I got out. I wrote a lot of books. Um, so I was going to just quit. And a couple of people said, well, what happens to all your knowledge? Because what I did, Robbie, was develop a system to write transformational books. So personal and professional development, prescriptive nonfiction, out of necessity because I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to figure out, okay, wait, how does this go? Aren't we supposed to deliver on a promise here? Aren't we supposed to be connecting? Wait, how does this work? Does this actually work? Or are you just talking about stuff? And so in my naivete, I was like, and of course, anxiety, I was like, I got to figure out how to make this actually work. It probably would have been worse if I had had training from someone. But because I thought it had to be a certain way, I developed this process for myself to ensure that books were actually working.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in a time when a lot of people didn't care, and they still don't. A lot of people still don't care. They just want the transaction, the completion of the book, and they aren't really even thinking, does anyone want to read this? Like, even when they're selling a lot of books, they aren't really thinking, are people reading the books that they bought or that I gave them or whatever?
And
And,
acting on the
and
book.
acting on, which is essential for prescriptive nonfiction. This is the thing people don't get is a book first becomes highly recommended because people are doing it. And there's an art to getting people to actually do it. There's a whole art to that. So over 20 years or so, I developed, well, really, at first was the first 11 years, my own system for me. And Mike said, I told Mike, I don't think I can teach this because it's just like intrinsically in me. I'm the only one. And he said, BS, except to use the actual curse word. And he said, you have systems, you just don't know what they are. So you should teach this. And I said, I don't know. So I said, okay, let me see. And I did a year of client work where instead of ghosting, I was kind of like shepherding, applying my own process and then serving more like developmental editor in the process. And I wrote down everything so that I could, oh, I do have a system.
What year is this?
2016, 2017-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, oh, I could teach a class. And I remember my business coach at the time said, you know what? No one ever does a real budget for authors. Like, what's money in? What's money out? How does it work? What are the different paths? I said, oh, I could just teach that simple class. Let me try that. And because the time I was a ghost, I took it upon myself to become very educated about publishing. And the reason was just as a ghost, so many of my clients would say, well, I don't know what to do about my contract, or I don't know what to do about this. I didn't know. So I went to go try and figure it out. And fortunately I live in New York where I have access to things. And so when I tried to do the budget class, I realized how much of it was actually tied to writing a good book. That was so I said, all right, I got to teach the whole thing. So I started a workshop. It's called Top 3 Book Workshop, and we launched in 2018. And we're currently in the middle of it. We have, well, not the middle. We have 3 weeks left. I do it once a year for about 15 to 18 people. And I'm super proud of my students that have come out of there and become have written books that people love and recommend and read and keep in their backpacks and on their nightstands, and that have become a fixture in their lives, but also have become national bestsellers and USA Today, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, a bunch of other ones. I'm proud of that too, but what I'm more proud of is when they say, I hear from my readers all the time about how it changed their life. So I do teach that workshop, and the book came from that. I was never going to write the book, even though people said, when are you going to write a book on writing? I was, why would I do that? If I'm going to write a book, I want to write a novel or something else. And then in a moment I did talk about often, I was on vacation with friends, and they asked me about my class. And they said, how many people do you work with? And at the time it was more because I did the class twice a year at that time. But it was still only about 30 people. And they said, oh, so you have about 30 people a year. And it just went, oh God, you're so elitist. You are so elitist. You need to change. You can't do that. So since I knew it worked, the systems and the different frameworks that I created, I said, you better write the book, because then at least a person can get it from the library if they don't even have $1, and they can learn. So that's the only reason I wrote it. I'm so glad I did, but that is the reason.
The book's message is also one of hope, because so many authors, a fear that I've heard from people who want to be intentional is that their efforts are going to fall on deaf ears, that there will be no movement in their business, that they'll waste money, that they'll be swindled, because there are lots of people out there who will take their money and publish their blog posts and just be like, here's a book. And I'm like, yeah, that's a printer. That's not a publisher.
Yes.
So they're concerned that if they even sidestep all of those things, their book still won't be good enough, or it won't have a message. It won't meet the moment. And that's the people who have real integrity. Like, those are the people who are nervous about this, or doing it for the right. Like, it's not just to have a book, not just to have a business card. I'm so tired of that cliche, but they feel compelled to, like you said, reach more people, impact more people, show people that there's another way forward. They believe in the value of what they're creating, but they just don't know. And that not knowing, it's a big black box. The whole world of publishing is a lot of not knowing, and then you're thrust into it. So how do you find like people's reactions to reading this book? You know, what are your readers saying to you about this, and how are people using the book? Because one of the things I love, my latest book came out, it's about launching a book, very meta. 2 people just launched their books following my book steps. My book just came out 3 months ago. So the fact that that even happened that quickly, and are getting incredible results. They'll talk about me for the rest of their lives and like spread the word. Best referral partners you'll ever have. Didn't pay me a dime except buying a book. I'm curious about people who don't get to work with you directly. They're not one of the 15 lucky each year, but they still now have access to information that used to be locked away in your head or behind a paywall. How are they reacting to this?
Oh, I just love hearing from readers. And you know what I hear so often is, "I've been trying to write this book for 5 years, 10 years." Those are the numbers, and suddenly it's unlocked and I'm doing it. That's amazing. I hear from people who, were able to not only finish, but they feel proud of it because, when we're proud, we're not saying, "Please read this." We don't, it doesn't feel like something that, um, we wanna talk about that often, and you probably see that with book launches.
Mm-hmm.
People who don't love something about the book are not gonna promote it as well as they should. And then eventually they just peter out. I'm sure you see that too. Um, I always tell people give up in different stages of authorship, but most people give up. Sometimes they give up before they finish. Sometimes they give up in editing and they say, "It's fine. I'll do better on the next one." Don't say that. And some say give up when they try to find a publisher and they just quit trying to do that. And then I'd say most people quit the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do this launch, and the launch is probably just a little bit of what they wanted to do, and then it's 3, 6 months later,
It's just a
or
page on their website.
just
It's a footnote. Yeah.
occasionally, "It's my book birthday anniversary," or, "Will you leave me a review?" Um, yeah, and so they give up, and it's just a process, different stages of giving up. So I love when I hear from readers who are not giving up.
Yeah. And they're seeing it through. Um, I've met with I don't even know, so many authors, hundreds of authors, somewhere on their journey, just getting started, or some have already published. They're now like, well, now what do I do? And I asked 2 questions, kind of, where are you in the process of this book happening? They're happy to talk about that. They're happy to tell me all about the book. That's fine. But then I say, well, how does this book relate back to your business? Like, if I'm enjoying this book as a reader and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like, how do I find you? What's the next thing I can do with you? Like, give me some dotted lines between this book and your business. I'm amazed. People who have published the book already, worked with hybrid publishers, still, got support along the way, cannot answer that question. And that's why they're not doing anything else with it. Like, the book isn't, they weren't writing the right book. So talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you help people figure out the book to write, the audience to reach, not just to like dump all their blog posts into a Word doc
Said that
and
twice, so I think this is a pet peeve you
it
have.
is kind of a pet peeve of mine because I the pressure to, okay, I'm part of the National Speakers Association and I've been part of it since 2015. And I spent the first 2 years getting that drum beat over and over again. You need a book, you need a book, you need a book. But no one talked about it needs to be a good book. It needs to have a particular audience. It needs to have a message that works. And here's how you're going to use the book. Like, I didn't get any of those messages. And it was only towards, again, and I'm not a person who was drawn to writing in the first place. So I like get to the point where I have the book and I'm about to send it off to an editor after having read it out loud 3 times. I was so sick of this book. I was at the point where I was going to give up, like you said. And that's when I realized it was A, a good book, and B, I wanted people to read this book. And that's when I realized I needed to create a launch plan and I
Mm.
needed to focus on reviews because reviews are social proof. How I knew that, I don't know. I had like a little inkling. I had some access to some authors. Nobody else was really putting the kind of intense focus on reviews as I was. Everyone then and now was talking about number 1 bestseller. NSA was very clear that was not like this big, wonderful thing that was going to change my life. So I was like, well, I won't focus on that. but I have 37 number one bestseller categories across 4 books in 4 countries because of the launches that I did, which most people skip. They go from publishing to marketing. And I don't know why we would pay money to send people to the book sales page if it's not converting, if it doesn't have, reviews and sales and generating some enthusiasm. So that's the piece I've really sliced out. But it really started with me feeling like this book was actually valuable. And I just think any author who feels that way, like, would feel more compelled to want to tell people about it. So getting the right book seems to be, it's well before me, right? Like I'm not a developmental editor. I'm not a writing coach. I'm a strategist. We could brainstorm, but like, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what are some questions maybe people should ask themselves to make sure they're on that right path.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the first question I always tell authors to consider is, who do you want to hang out with for the next 5 years?
That's cool.
And by hang out, I mean, who are you going to write about for the next year or two? Okay. And then getting published and getting the book ready to go. And then after that, who do you want to hear from? Who do you want to serve? Who do you want to work with as you monetize it? And you have to want to be with that group. And you'll be surprised how many people will say, "Oh, I'm not doing that book." Because when you realize it's not just the transaction of completing the book, but it's how it's part of your whole ecosystem, and that you're going to be in service, because that's my value, is how are we serving the reader from beginning till never ending, honestly.
Mm.
So you have to want to commit at least 5 years to being with this group, at least a significant enough amount of time. And that's your first question.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's important to find out, okay, what do they need most? What's urgent for them? What problem do they want to solve in the next 12 months? Or what desire do they want to fulfill, which is tied to the problem, in the next 12 months, however you want to, whatever doorway you want in? And then what do I know that can get them that? And those are the initial questions. And then I think it is important to always consider, where does this fit then with my own business strategy, so that you can plant seeds for revenue and reader engagement in the book, so that you are thinking, okay, I'm going to leverage it in this way. How am I need to direct people to that in a way that feels organic and not like salesy, pitchy. But you have to have considered these things in advance. And but initially, though, who are your people that you want to hang with? That's the very first question.
I feel like a lot of authors do the opposite of what you just described. They start with what they want to tell people. And you just said, figure who the people are that you want to hang with for the next 5 years and what problem they are trying to solve,
Hmm.
or what desire they're trying to achieve
Hmm.
tied to that problem. I love this. There's that whole awareness sort of cycle, symptom aware. I call it little p, problem aware. So the problem people know they have and they're willing to admit. The thing we want to write about, speak about, coach about is the big P problem that our big solution is tied to. But there's a mismatch between the person looking for a Band-Aid and us offering surgery. And the book can help bridge that, educate people. That's part of what I'm always trying to do in the books. So that people can, some will DIY it because that's what they can do. They can't afford to work with me. But others will say, oh, wow, that's a great solution. I can't do that on my own. Like, but that's different from me always saying, like, I know what people need. I'm going to write about this. I feel like there's an expert syndrome piece there where we're a little blinded to our own knowledge. And people have to take a step back. The other thing I think I've seen, and I'm curious your take on this, I've talked to some authors who have written a book, published it, and when I talk to them, it comes up that it's really book 2. Like there was another book that would have been a better first book that maybe was a little more foundational, would have brought people in a little bit. They jumped to what they were excited about now, not what they were working on 10 years ago. And so they skipped kind of a few steps. So the only readers who were able to engage were the people who like were more familiar with their work, and it wasn't as appealing. Have you seen that? What's your take on that?
I have seen it in different ways. Sometimes there's a book and the readers just aren't ready for it, or sometimes there's a problem that you didn't realize they have until you publish it, and then you got to address that problem first.
Yeah.
I have a student, Marsha Dawood, who wrote Do Good While Doing Well, and it's about angel investing. Do you know Marsha?
I do, and I've read the book. So
You know she has a book too, right?
no, I didn't.
Okay, so she's a alum of my workshop, and she's part of my author collective, which is a group of authors who all graduated from my program and continue to work with me in some capacity. And she realized that Do Good While Doing Well, there was a barrier where women especially did not think that they were equipped, ready, had any business being angel investors, and there was a block. So she, oh gosh, I have to write a prequel.
Yeah.
And so
Good example.
it's coming out in the spring. It's amazing. So you got to connect with her. It's really
That's great. I read the book, and I actually I like listening to books, and I remember I had that on ebook, so I had it play through Alexa. Through the Alexa app, you can listen to a book. It's not great, but like for prescriptive nonfiction, it kind of works. I just remember sitting in the car and like being hit by some ideas that she was saying. But yeah, I could totally see how the message in the book may not reach as many people because they themselves don't think it's for them. Like it's missing a mark for them.
yeah.
Good example of how she could bridge that for people, but she may not have realized it because clearly she had, as a woman, gotten past her own angst. I mean, she had the story of that too in that book, but it may not have been enough for her audience to follow along.
She didn't know. She didn't know it was so deep, and so she went to address it. So sometimes you don't know. I think there's also the issue of, oh, you should write this practical book. Here's the book everybody wants, but in your heart, you're wanting to write something else, and that can also be a problem because then you're kind of waiting to get that done so that you will do the one that you really want to write, and that is just, oh, who wants to read that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think this is where strategy comes in when you're thinking, what's the first book? Mike, we wrote a book called Fix This Next, and that's probably the first book that should have been written. But we didn't know. And it's the one where you put it all together, where you diagnose the problem. So then once you've diagnosed it, you can then choose, am I going to focus on profit? Am I going to focus on streamlining my business? Am I going to focus on client generation? What am I doing? We had all those books, so we could direct them.
Right. It went back to that book helped triage where do you go next in his whole his whole library of books. One of the things I'm always trying to dispel with authors is what metrics of success are worth aiming for, putting a ton of energy, effort, and maybe even some money into, and what are the metrics that are really just vanity metrics that are a flash in the pan moment, exciting, but not as long lasting and sustainable as far as impact on the book or impact on the business. What are your thoughts about where authors could put some more energy and get a better outcome, and where maybe they could put less energy?
I wish all authors spent more time in book development, making sure that they had a super strong foundation. In tests, if they're doing prescriptive nonfiction, that they're sure their prescription works for people, not just for them. And so that's part of development. Also editing. Most people skimp on it. They don't understand what it is. They don't understand how many people are involved, and they don't get quality editors. And they don't know to ask if some of their publishing options are offering them quality editors. So books are made in editing. So I think that's a huge problem. But when it comes to other metrics of success, in terms of once the book is published and how what you invest in, can we stop with the billboards? Can we stop with trying to get, these spending a lot of money on Amazon bestseller campaigns, which it sounds like you got yours organically. If you do your book launch right, you don't have to do that. It is just going to happen. I think some people shouldn't spend so much money trying to get on the national lists.
Let me actually say a little more about this, because I don't think a lot of people understand that there's costs involved. The people who don't know this, who just think they're going to write a good book and it's going, USA Today. What do you mean by spending a lot of money?
Well, let me first say though that I have students, T3 alums, especially this summer we had a bunch who didn't spend money on it. It did happen organically. Katie Killerwood's Alignment became a USA Today bestseller. She wasn't doing the typical things you would do to get on the list. And then Carrie Burnight's book, Joy Span, made USA Today and New York Times. And she also was not doing the things that people typically do to get on the list. So it's not unheard of, but it is, as you know, lightning in a bottle. So you can't predict it. But what people try to do is kind of muscle their way on, you know. And so then you're hiring a consultant most often because, especially if you're trying to get on the Times, USA Today is so much easier because it's just the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Much, much simpler. But the Times is, as you know, there's an editorial board. And so it's not as simple. Plus, nobody really knows their secret sauce about how they're making those decisions. But we do know that there's a certain math to how many books do you need to sell in the time. So in the pre-order time, leading up to the book being released and in the first week of release. And it changes month by month. You know, there's months where it's easier and months where it's harder, but you're still looking at 10, 15,000 books, right? But then those books have to be sold in different geographic locations and from big box and indie and also different online retailers. They can't all be Amazon. They can't all be bulk buy. And then there has to be a consistent flow. It can't just all be, there's so many variables that you need helpers. So you need someone who understands that system, and they usually cost a lot of money. And so you're looking at, 6 figures to try and get on it. Plus, you often have to buy a bunch of books.
Yeah.
It's complicated. I'm not going to get into it, but it's money.
So is it worth it? Like, have you found someone who's like, yeah, I'm happy I dropped 6 figures in this campaign and it changed my business trajectory?
I think I know some former clients of mine who I can't name. It did help.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was 15 years ago. It's not the same anymore.
Feels different.
It does.
I actually have a friend of mine who lives on the West Coast who bought a window display at, I guess it's the Barnes and Noble on Fifth Avenue. And yeah,
I think it's like $5,000.
Yeah. And you have to buy a certain number of books, right? Mm-hmm. Basically at their whatever fee that they sell them at. And you get to keep the books, which is the only way I was able to touch him off the ledge, because when he got there was scaffolding in front of the window. He flies across the country and he has this whole video. So he's walking through the city. He's taking pictures of himself in the city. He's heading towards this place. And then he's like being videotaped, like as he's walking. And then he realizes, and he shares it. He still does a thumbs up in front of the display within the constraints of this like construction thing. And I said, well, were you planning on giving out this many books anyway? I said, so now you have all these books to give away. But that, the cost and effect, like how helpful was that for that clip? And then I've also seen people doing the billboards like in Times Square, where you stand there for a second to like point to it. Which, by the way, no one knows it happened. And these days, AI could create that for you. Like, stop it, everybody. You don't know whether it's real or not. That's one of the problems. So, I think that the energy I'm putting towards this is building a launch team with your likely prospects and referral partners. Mm-hmm. So even if they don't, like, the goal is 50 or more written reviews, and not just the 5 stars, but the written reviews. But the purpose of it is to have a conversation as a business owner with these prospects and referral partners over the couple of months of the launch, because good things will come, like revenue opportunities, media opportunities. And I've had people hire me who didn't write a review, but they were on the launch and they saw things and they experienced it and they came to my private training. So they heard me talk about it. So I get referrals, I get on podcasts, and these are from people who don't follow through with the thing I was asking them to do, but they're still a more engaged network. And that's the piece of the thing a lot of people just skip. I've had a podcast for like a decade, and for 8.5 years, it was about networking and leadership. It was called On the Schmooze. And I would get pitched all the time by PR companies, podcast placement companies. And I only had like 14 spots a year for men because 2 out of 3 guests were women. And I was pretty particular. Like Mike Michalowicz was the kind of person I would want to have on, right? Someone who had a lot to share. And I would get pitched people all the time because they wrote a book. And if it was a book about networking, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that's right up our alley. Like I go to Amazon, 7 ratings, 4 reviews, and one of the reviews shares the same last name as the author. And I'm like, you wrote a book, you worked at a Harvard publisher, whose name I recognize, you paid how much money for this well-known publicity place, and you're a networking person who didn't bother to wake up your own network. It made me not want to put them on the show. It's like the exact opposite. So all the accolades and all the trying to hit these benchmarks, I'm like, please focus on these things. Are there any closing thoughts? Just, how would you help get someone to even think this is a book they need to read to get them started? Like, what's your message to the person who is just starting to think about writing a book and they want it to do well? They want to make sure that they don't make all the missteps that we're talking about.
Take all your arbitrary deadlines and arbitrary metrics and throw them in the garbage. I would say, because it's gonna make you feel bad. It's not based in anybody's reality. It's a comparison game. It's pulled from misinformation and disinformation. So be on your own timeline. Deadlines are good, but don't set arbitrary sales goals, arbitrary finish goals. It just makes people nuts, and also it makes us feel bad. And every time we feel bad, we are more prone to quit. So that would be one. And number 2, know that if you get the idea for the book, I believe wholeheartedly that you have the ability to execute it. You might need help, but that's your book. It's not the immediate pushback in our brains is, who am I to write this? It's probably already been done. No one's going to read it. These are the things I hear all the time. But I believe if you get the idea, it's yours. So go forward with that.
Love it. How can people find you and follow your work?
ajharper.com. I'm also here on LinkedIn, and I also, you can listen to my podcast with Mike Michalowicz. It's called Don't Write That Book. And it is, we just had our 100th episode. It's just the 2 of us talking about our different views on, which are often very different takes on publishing, authorship, writing, editing, all of it. And I would say it's probably one of the best free educations you can get about authorship. So check us out there.
I will put all the links in the show notes at bizbookpubhub.com, where you also get all the past shows that we've done. We've now done hundreds, which has been amazing. We also have a curated directory of experts who support entrepreneurs through their author journey, writing, editing, publishing, launching, and marketing their book. Free virtual networking events every single month. A Kindle flash sale that I organize 3 times a year. A blog post. We've got so much great content. So go check it all out at bizbookpubhub.com. AJ, thank you again so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.